Wow, we got a bigger today. So hi, everyone that wasn't here the past couple of meetings. I'm Meg. I'm so excited to introduce my friend, Jonathan. I'm not sure if anybody had a chance to just read the brief description Chris posted on the ISTO social media, but Jonathan's an occupational therapist by trade. He's very experienced with pediatrics. He's volunteered with a couple different serve therapy programs. We're so lucky to have him. He's based out of California. And without further ado, I'm going to let Jonathan kind of delve into the details of his background. The brief kind of format of what we were thinking for this call, maybe the first about 20 minutes, Jonathan has a little bit of content he'll go over, and then the last 40 minutes we'll go into Q&A. But by all means, if you have any questions or comments like throughout, just please chime in. I do believe we have a couple other occupational therapists on the call. So if any of these questions or topics we're talking about and you have anything you want to add based on your clinical experience, please also chime in. This is a very casual, open conversation. So with that said, Jonathan, take it away.
Hi there, everyone. My name is Jonathan. Can you all hear me okay? Perfect. So as Meg was saying, I'm a pediatric occupational therapist. Right now, I work at the NAPA Center in Los Angeles. Rachel, you were saying that you're from Boston, correct?
Yes.
Very cool. So we actually have a clinic out there in Boston as well. I don't know if you've heard of it before, the NAPA Center.
No, I haven't, but that's good to know.
Yeah. It's a neurodevelopmental clinic where we work with children that have various diagnoses of different developmental disabilities, such as cerebral palsy, spina bifida, spinal cord injury, in addition to seeing some kids that are on the spectrum, Down syndrome, what have you. But our specialty is definitely neurodevelopmental pediatrics. So that's where I currently served. I've been there for about, I would say, coming up on 3 years and some change. I absolutely love my job. And the cool thing about me and my journey with OT is the fact that in this really organic way, I found it through occupational therapy. So my journey first started in undergrad at Cal State Fullerton when I was taking a surfing class. I had to do a project in regards to increasing my awareness about surfing culture. And that's when I found this really awesome surf therapy organization called the Jimmy Miller Memorial Foundation. Hold on, sorry, 1 second. My Zoom kind of just froze up a little bit. Let me open that up again.
Okay, well, while Jonathan's doing that, I'm taking another screenshot of you gorgeous faces. So everybody smile. I love you. I miss you. Smile. Thank you.
Sorry about this, having some technical difficulties. 1 second. Okay, can you guys all hear me? Okay, perfect. All right. So yes, I found the Jimmy Miller Memorial Foundation through this surfing class and found out more about Carly Rogers, who started the Jimmy Memorial Foundation. And in this really organic way, just the fact that you could turn something that you really love to do into a means for therapy just really, really appealed to me. So I sort of followed the same journey that Carly had. Attended USC, which is the program that she went to, because I was really interested in their community-based programming class, and just found out more about the profession of occupational therapy and all the different ways that I could reinvent myself. Had an opportunity to work with a number of individuals from all walks of life, whether that be individuals who have cancer, to at-risk youth populations, to, of course, pediatrics, to veterans, what have you. I did fieldwork experiences at the Honolulu VA, as well as the Queens Medical Center in Honolulu as well, working with at-risk youth populations. and ended up doing the doctorate in occupational therapy. Did my residency at Children's Hospital Los Angeles, where I specialized in pediatric mental health. So during this experience, I was working with children that had a comorbid diagnosis of both a mental health diagnosis as well as a developmental disability. And it was over there that I really fell in love with family-centered care and working within the world of neurodevelopmental disability. So yeah, what I do right now, I definitely have surfing to thank for it, because I don't know if I would have found occupational therapy had it not been my experience of finding this awesome surf therapy program, the Jimmy Miller Memorial Foundation. And during my experience at USC, I actually had the opportunity to do an independent study with Jimmy Miller, where I got to work with Chris and Carly, and just be a part of the organization and some of the things that they were trying to accomplish at the time. But most of all, just getting out there in the water with our veterans in Camp Pendleton, and some of our at-risk youth populations in the greater Los Angeles area. But yeah, it's been a blessing so far to organically find my way along this journey, and also have an opportunity to give back to all of you who are obviously very involved in the surf therapy world, and creating a future for something that I passionately and thoroughly believe in. But with that said, I'm just going to continue to talk about some of the topics that may be helpful in regards to the distinct value of occupational therapy and my perspective, and how that can be beneficial to all of you. With that said, if any of you have questions at all, feel free to flag me down. But first off, I'll just start off with what is occupational therapy. I was having this conversation with Meg yesterday, and how depending on the person you ask, it could be a different answer. And I think the reason that is because in occupational therapy, there's so many different arenas that you could operate. As I mentioned earlier, I've had the opportunity and the blessing of working with individuals who have cancer, all the way to working with at-risk youth populations. At USC, I actually did an externship in the Philippines, where I had the opportunity to sort of conceptualize what disability may look like in the Philippines. And that was an interesting perspective. And also just a great opportunity to sort of reconnect with my heritage and provide a perspective in regards to some of the things that we're doing here in the US, to some of the occupational therapy programs that are being created in the Philippines. But yeah, I think that in occupational therapy, it's also a very exciting time, because you have these really innovative programs where we're using this construct of occupation, which is defined as meaningful activity, to help empower individuals to get back to the things that they love to do. So within the context of ocean therapy, the occupation would be surfing, right? But yeah, I think the cool thing about occupational therapy is you could work with anybody across the lifespan. Like, I've worked with babies that are as young as 11 months, and I've worked with individuals that are as old as 84 years, right? So I think that it's pretty cool that there's so many different ways to reinvent yourself within the field. And if I had to define what occupational therapy is, we work on the underlying skills that manifest into function to help empower somebody to be their most independent selves, and to lead lives in which they find meaning. So I know that could be a pretty broad definition, but with that said, the scope of occupational therapy can be pretty broad. And depending on where you go, occupational therapy and occupational therapists have a distinct value. So where I'm at the NAPA Center right now, occupational therapists have distinct value in that we work predominantly on regulation and sensory processing for a lot of our populations. At the NAPA Center, we also have something called an intensive therapy program, where we'll see kids from all over the world for as long as 3 weeks. And basically, based on their need, we will create like anywhere from like a 3 to 5 hour block of therapy based off of what would help them support their development. And we'll see them every day for 3 weeks. And this program has garnered such great outcomes that we get families from all over the world. And a lot of times when I'm part of a team, I'm focusing on things like their postural control, which is their ability to work on engaging their proximal core muscles in order to maintain their balance over any type of dynamic surface, or to work on keeping their center of gravity within their body. We also work on a lot of sensory processing. So just to use autism as an example, 80% of kids that are on the spectrum have some type of sensory processing challenge, meaning that they take in this world much differently than you and I. So part of my job is helping understand the child's world a bit more, just so that way we could develop the rapport. So that way, together we can walk to this really vulnerable place where we can work on some of the things that are harder for them. In addition to that, I also just work on like neurodevelopmental handling, different developmental scaffolding in terms of like age appropriate milestones, and predominantly at our clinic, because we are a neurodevelopmental clinic, that's doing things like helping the child roll or sit up independently, maybe eat a solid meal for the first time, being able to take their first steps, being able to balance over dynamic surfaces, so that way it could decrease incidence of falls, things like that. But I work in conjunction with a physical therapy and a speech therapy team. So that way we could view the child more holistically. And I think that, I know that occupational therapy and its perspective can be applied to just about anything. So my hope is today, as I share more about what I do and my perspective, that my lived experience can provide some wisdom for individuals that are looking to better their program. Because yeah, occupational therapy has a number of frame of references that can be applied to any situation. I have some other questions here too, that I was going to talk about. So when evaluating kiddo, what are some things that I'm looking for? I mentioned a little bit about that in regards to like our intensive therapy program and what my distinct value is as an occupational therapist. But just in general, we're always looking to see, first off, what the family wants, right? What is the family going to work on together collectively? Because even though we see these kids for 3 weeks at a time, the true agent of change is the family, because they see them every day. And our goal is to help be a compass or to empower the family with the knowledge and the resources, so that way they feel empowered to be able to continue the therapy even after the intensive or the therapy is over. In addition to that, I think that also helping families be a part of the process, in the evaluation process, in terms of what they really want to focus on, helps them have a say in their therapy. And a lot of the families that we work with just haven't had an opportunity to really have their voice heard. So I really enjoy that experience. And in addition to that, I'm always looking at the underlying skills that manifest in the function, going back to my definition of occupational therapy. So in pediatrics, those underlying skills are going to be sensory processing. We're also going to look at regulation skills. We're also going to look at things like joint attention, which is a child's ability to register their attention within a shared activity with a peer. We're also going to look at things like sequencing, which is their ability to cognitively sequence a number of steps together. We're also looking at fine motor skills, which is the ability to use the fine intrinsic muscles of the hand in order to accomplish functional tasks. We're also working on postural control, which I mentioned earlier, is your ability to balance on dynamic surfaces, or your ability to right your body when you're still working on being able to develop your core proximal strength, in regards to so many other things that will manifest in the function. So yeah, I'm constantly looking at all of these things. And in addition to that, just trying to find different ways to connect with the kiddo. I think that's a lot of what my style is. You know, showing the kid that, you know, I'm going to do my best to help understand them, and to show the child that I can understand their world. Because as I mentioned earlier, if I can get to that place, then we could, you know, together get to this place where we can help push the kid to be the best version of themselves. And also it's just more fun that way. And it's, yeah, like my job is super fun because I get to be a big kid along with, you know, the super adorable kids that I get to work with in terms of helping them be their best selves. So with that said, I do have a number of other questions here, but I also want to open up the conversation to any specific questions that you guys may have. But if you guys would like, I can also talk about some of the things that I do within my job and how that relates to surfing. So I could talk about like the parallels between occupational therapy and surfing or surf therapy, or how surf therapy programs can embed occupational therapy-based concepts into programs. First, I just wanted to open it up. If not, I could just go ahead and continue with some of the questions that I've outlined here.
Jonathan, if you could, I know people that are already maybe in like the therapy field. To us, it's almost like you don't really realize you're doing it, but can you talk more about some of the specific things you do to start building a relationship with a kid?
Yeah, for sure. So I think that one of the models that I was trained in the most was DIR / floor time, or the direct individual relational approach. So the whole premise of that is everybody has these stages of human function. It's a socio-emotional developmental model. And within these stages, while it follows a linear progression, one thing can sort of happen and you're back at sort of square one. And that very first step is regulation / shared attention. And going back to what I was talking about earlier, a lot of my job is showing the child that I could understand their world. So going back to that first stage, regulation / shared attention, a lot of that is first being able to understand like the child's sensory processing. So a lot of the kids that I work with have challenges with what we call like their vestibular processing. So in our ears, we have these organs, the otolith organs and the semicircular canals, which are responsible for helping us understand where our head is in relation to space. And that's how we develop like writing reactions, balance, equilibrium. So the vestibular system actually has a big impact on your regulation, as well as your motor planning, which is your ability to create an efficient motor sequence based off of a given activity. And the vestibular system obviously has an impact on our balance and our ability to prevent falls. So a lot of what I look at within the realm of sensory processing is the vestibular system, because it does affect your overall regulation. And within my field, we're constantly focusing on that because we're trying to help kids be more upright and to walk and to maintain their balance a little bit more. But that's one of the first things that I'll look at. I'll also look at their motor planning. As I mentioned earlier, I'll also look at how they respond to tactile features, their auditory processing, things like that. And going from there, I'm always working within their world to create a safe and fun environment for them. So if I have a child with, say, auditory processing disorder, I may talk to them within a certain like frequency or register, or I might create an environment where there's decreased auditory stimuli just to show them that I can understand the world a bit more. A lot of the kids that I work with have difficulties with joint attention and reciprocal play. So in order to connect with them in that way, within the floor time model, like say a child is doing something quote unquote unfunctional, such as like tapping on something, like I might tap with them as well. Or say they like crashing into like a crash pad on the floor, I might do that as well, just to show them that I can understand their world and that we could create these reciprocal opportunities where like as you do, I can do too. And as we continue to do this and we create those subtle instances of eye contact, which will eventually turn into a smile, which will eventually turn into maybe laughing or them reciprocating. In that moment, I'm understanding the world a bit better to a point where the child may trust me more and more. In addition to that, just looking at the things that is most motivating for the child in terms of what they want to accomplish. And for most kids, especially my young ones, that's just their ability to play and to be able to have their bodies and their entire system be at a place where they could explore within their environment as a kid should do. But yeah, a lot of what I do in terms of developing rapport is just first meeting the child where they're at and understanding how the different sensory systems may manifest into function.
Can I ask a question?
Yeah, of course.
Hi, Jonathan. I'm Suzanne from the Netherlands.
Hi, Suzanne. How's it going?
I'm fine. I was wondering, do you have examples? How do you use the beach to reach specific goals for your children?
Yeah, of course. Definitely. I mean, we are an outpatient clinic at NAPA, so predominantly kids come to our clinic. But with that said, there's been a number of experiences where I've had the opportunity to work with some of our kids through the different organizations that we've worked with Jimmy Miller. And I think in particular, especially with like the average youth populations that we work with a lot of kids that have never gone to the ocean before or who are afraid because they don't know how to swim. Or they were indifferent about surfing going into that opportunity. And I think using that floor time model, I would sort of find ways to, especially for our kiddos that had more difficulties with sort of getting over that barrier in terms of diving in, finding more ways in which I could connect with them to help better understand their world. So if they are afraid, trying to get to the root of that, right? So for most of these kids, it's the fact that they've never been in the ocean before or that they've never swam before. So first honoring that, showing them that that's a very natural feeling. And even as a surfer, it's very natural to have, those nervous feelings sometimes, as you're paddling out, right? But first showing them that you understand what they're experiencing as well, but also being open to understanding the things that you may not have as much experience in, right? Like a lot of the kids that we worked with had a history of trauma. And I think that a lot of the kids that we work with are looking for somebody who, first and foremost, are willing to listen to their story and help empower their lived experience. But I think that utilizing their lived experience as a means to empower them to a place where that lived experience defines them in a wonderful way. Like this lived experience makes me more resilient, or this lived experience makes me more empowered by my vulnerability. Just in the same way you have to do with surfing, right? Like in surfing, it's an extremely vulnerable situation in which you have to explore outside of your comfort zone. But I think that with a lot of kids that we were working with trauma histories, if you're able to go with them to that really vulnerable place, if they're willing to, you would see them be a bit more free in terms of opening up and, possibly diving into the ocean. And not to say that always happened, we had some kids that would prefer to just take a step back, and that's totally okay too. Because I think that the wonderful thing about J.B. Miller and Chris is we would always find opportunities in which we could still empower these individuals to be a part of the process, right? And I think that in family-centered care, like what I do right now, I'm always looking for different ways in which we could empower different parts of the family unit. So that way everybody has sort of a like a team role. So for the individuals that may have not felt comfortable diving into the ocean, the conversation then shifted to, okay, well, how can this individual still feel empowered and feel like they do have a role here? Whether that would be like cheering for some of their friends that were going out, or even just like building sandcastles, jumping waves together, just finding ways in which it was still a successful experience where we're creating what we call like this just right challenge for the kiddo. Because the true therapy happens in the moments where you're able to create this really empowered vulnerability where the child is able to share their lived experience with others as a means to process the experience together, especially with other individuals within the group that may have a similar lived experience, in hopes that they could find ways where they can relate to one another. Yeah, and I think that there were a number of opportunities like that with a number of kids that we worked with through the Jimmy Miller Memorial Foundation.
And
Thank
Suzanne,
you.
your question, I know I volunteered with a couple other programs too, kind of the other end for programs that are more consistent, or some of like the weekly programs that you see them maybe a little more than like the 1 or 2 day big events. I think sometimes people forget that it's okay to not surf, even though it's surf therapy. So I think there's a lot of work that you can do even before they ever get on the surfboard. Like Jonathan was mentioning, like a lot of sandcastles, or you can make obstacle courses. Because I know when I work with a kid, it's almost like you need, this is how I design a session in my head of like a preparatory activity to help get them regulated to be ready for the maybe just a little bit past the just right challenge of surfing for the first time, or if they're overwhelmed by the sound of waves crashing, it's like they need to get regulated before they can really get past that entry point of the ocean. So a lot of times, you know, something that I used a lot, we call it heavy work. So it's basically like exercise, like a workout for a kid where they're actively using their joints, their muscles, army crawling in the sand. I think one time I did it, I sat on a surfboard and I had a couple kids like pull the leash to pull me into them, and kind of like pushing, pulling, the lifting. So those 3 things were those keywords: pushing, pulling, and lifting, and making an obstacle course based off of any kind of exercise based around that, and obviously making it really fun. So I think something else that you can do before you even get in the water is all of that like prep work. Obviously it's different based on the kid and what they need to work on. But I know I can imagine you could probably do it in the sand, but like those big exercise balls, if you dig a hole in the sand, you can stick the ball in the sand, and then you have a preparatory activity that kind of mimics what they have to do, that dynamic balance in the sand before you even get in the water. Just so those, hold on, sorry. Technical difficulties. Decline. Okay, sorry. Someone tried calling me and my whole phone changed. But the sense, kind of like trying to think of how can I mimic surfing on the sand before I go into the water to help the kid get in that like regulated state. And then one more point. I know Jonathan was talking a lot about helping the kid see that you're trying to understand their world. So one little girl came to mind. She wouldn't go out on the surfboard. So I was like, you know what? Why don't I flip the roles and I let her be like the instructor? So we played in the shore break. But if you times to say, you know what, you can be in charge, and giving them that kind of empowerment. Sometimes you just have to really imagine, I guess, what you would want if you were them. But does that make sense? Oh.
Yeah, I think that those are all great points. I think using like a more recent example, like this is a little girl that just finished up an intensive at our clinic. It wasn't necessarily at the beach because we are an outpatient clinic, although I would love for NAPA to have like some type of outpatient satellite site at the beach. That would be incredible. Unfortunately, we don't have that yet. But this little girl, when she came in and did her intensive, her big goal was she wanted to get back to surfing. Unfortunately, she had an accident where a slide landed on her head and it ended up creating a traumatic brain injury. But with that said, on her road to recovery, she said that she wanted to get back to surfing, which is something that she did a lot before the accident. So going into the experience, we worked on a number of things that are embedded in surfing. So a big part of that is like being able to integrate both sides together in this reciprocal way where we could create what we call reciprocal patterning, right? Which is essentially paddling. So for her, because she did have a traumatic brain injury, being able to connect both sides of the brain was something that we were constantly doing. And not only like being able to bilaterally integrate both sides together, but being able to do that within something as dynamic as surfing, right? Where you're constantly on this surface that is dynamic and changing, and which you have to constantly look around and see how you have to right or position your body in relation to what's happening to accomplish what you want to do. So a lot of that is being able to work on her vestibular system, on these sequential components that come with surfing, such as being able to accomplish a pop-up over a dynamic surface, being able to understand the visual perceptual demands of surfing, and the subtle things that I think as surfers we kind of just naturally do, but for somebody who is relearning how to surf and maybe has difficulties with coordination or is learning how to get back to that place where they could channel some of the same muscles again, helping them understand different ways in which they could still recruit those muscles and coordinate and sequence all of these wonderful skills together. So yeah, this little girl just finished up an intensive right now. And while she's still not ready to go into the ocean, she is in a much better place where she accomplished a lot of the short-term goals that we had in mind. And she's going to be continuing to come to NAPA in an outpatient capacity in hopes that we can get her back in the water in like the next 6 months or so. But yeah, I think that that could be one of the examples of even without like having a beach in mind, how I can still have an impact in terms of helping this little girl get back to her dream within the context of like an outpatient clinic. But like during this whole experience of COVID and doing like telehealth with some of my kiddos, I've become extremely resourceful in just like utilizing your surroundings. So at the beach, like sand is an incredible dynamic surface to work on. And just creating more opportunities in which you can help a child self-regulate at the beach, especially if they are feeling nervous or afraid, or if they're having difficulties with some of the sensory processing demands of surfing or the ocean. As Nick was saying, the ocean is fairly dynamic, and there's always like the loud crashing of the waves, and even just like looking at a wave sometimes for a lot of our kids, especially if they haven't been in the ocean before, like it could be pretty scary, right? So being able to understand that from the occupational therapy perspective, there's a number of things that I could do sensory wise, which we call inhibitory sensory-based strategies to help the child re-regulate. And some of those big things are going to be your heavy, what we call proprioceptive work. Proprioception just means like overall body awareness. But especially for kids, a lot of kids have a really high threshold for that, which makes sense because kids are constantly seeking within their environment to get more information as to how they could motor plan or, further discover around their environment. And they need, body awareness information to be able to do that. So kids accomplish this by like pushing, pulling on things, jumping, crashing into things. And from the OT perspective, it is something that we could do to help calm down a child if they're feeling afraid or scared, or if we have a child that is really like overstimulated to the point where we have to get them to a point of optimal regulation. In addition to that, Going back to the vestibular system, there's different types of vestibular activities that you could do to help calm a child if they're feeling really reactive or overstimulated. So typically any type of like linear vestibular input can be very organizing for the child. So that would be just any type of like swinging motion. So at our clinic, we would do this on a swing, but like at the beach, like if I was trying to provide a kid vestibular input, I could always just put them prone, like on my hands, and just like rock them back and forth. You could always just put them maybe like on a longboard and then like rock them back and forth. You could do different type of activities in regards to spinning can also be helpful if you have a child that, well, rhythmic swing can be helpful for a child that may have difficulties with waking up their vestibular system. So we can do that to help sort of alert them so that way their vestibular system is primed to make those writing reactions. And in addition to that, you could also use like joint compressions or what we call like deep pressure squeezes as a means to help calm a child down, which is another inhibitory sensory-based strategy that we might use.
That was great. And also, like I said before, I am taking some notes. I have two kind of things. First, I want to address Teresa. I saw your comment in the chat. I don't know if you want to just elaborate on that a little bit more. Oh, I lost it. Are you still here? Where'd you go?
Hi there, Teresa. How's it going?
Hi,
Hi.
I'm Teresa from Portugal, Lisbon.
Hi, Teresa from Portugal.
Well, I'm a volunteer and vice president of Surf Addict, which is a non-profitable association, and we work with handicapped people of all ages.
Amazing.
And as we're talking about, for instance, children who have difficulties in participating to go in the water. So we have that too, of course.
Yeah, of course.
And what we do, we don't force them, of course. So a lot of times, if we have our monthly events, we invite them to just help us at the accreditation table where we have all the enrollments. So they are really happy to be helpful. And sometimes we bring them to the shore, near the shore, and also they do what you told, cheering for their friends. So we always make sure we involve them so that they don't feel sad for not participating, because it's really important that they feel useful and happy to belong to a group. So that's it.
Yeah, I think that's wonderful, Teresa. Thank you so much for sharing. I think going back to your story, I think that a word that I hear a lot in surfing and in my surfing experiences is just overall like community. I think surfing in of itself, even though it is kind of like an individualized sport, you kind of find community, right? Like you may see that person that you always end up paddling next to, and then you end up becoming friends. Like I have found community within this awesome like surf therapy world. I've found community, with other organizations that I've met through the Jimmy Memorial Foundation. But I think that within my process as a therapist, I'm always looking to see how I can create some type of community or family unit. So going back to like what I do at NAPA, like giving everybody a role. So like if a child comes in with like a sibling, giving the sibling like a toy so that way they could still play their favorite game with their brother or sister within a therapeutic activity where like their sibling may be the motivator to do this game that they love to play together. But in that moment, I'm helping understand the child's world because I'm still facilitating this really organic moment of play. But as a therapist, like I'm looking at the things that I'm trying to accomplish, whether that be helping the child's overall like proximal core trunk stability, or their ability to extend their body against gravity, or their ability to work on more rotation, things like that. but doing it in this really organic way where it may look like play. And finding a role for both mom and dad as well, whether that be training mom to feel empowered to do some of the higher level exercises that we do at the clinic, practice it with her, so that way she feels empowered to do it at home too. Or maybe giving dad an opportunity to be silly with me if we're having like a dress up day, and you know, having a fun game where he could be a part of it as well. But those are just some examples of just like the value of creating some type of unit where there is community. And I think that you know, in my experiences reflecting on working with Jimmy Miller, like there is always this really amazing community that I was really excited to see with every session, from like prep to actual session to like breakdown. Everybody had a distinct but valuable role, whether that be you know, setting up all the supplies or the check-in table, leading exercises within our circle. And within the Jimmy Miller Memorial Foundation, we always start up with like an opening circle and a closing circle, which gives an opportunity for everybody to have a say and to feel like they have a voice. So yeah, I do think that community is a huge part of what we do, and a key ingredient in creating successful programs.
And I do see Simone use the little hand. I've never seen that before, the hand raising. You want to go ahead?
Okay, hi, I'm Simone. I'm from Spain.
Hi, Simone.
Yeah, it's really interesting what you're telling, and I think there are so many options that we have at the beach and in the community. I'm an OT as well.
Very cool.
Yeah. And yes, but something what I would love to add, and maybe it might sound a bit shocking, but something what I really think a lot about these last time is that I think at the same time we have to be very aware as well that there is still self-determination and self-directed decision of the children, that maybe sometimes the beach and the surf is not for this child what he or she wants to do. So I think we can have a lot of options, and it's really beautiful. Huh? So I really don't say that it is not, but I think sometimes as well we are so super motivated with our action. And I'm the first, because I'm like super motivated of what I'm doing. But I think that as well, it is very important to listen to the children, and especially to the children who are non-verbal, to see, okay, is this an activity you would choose?
Yeah.
Yes, and I think that that this is not easy, because there are many things we can provide them, and they can get a lot of positive opportunities out of it. But sometimes I think as well that it is very interesting to sit down with them and to see, okay, if you would choose your activity, would this be the activity what you would choose? Do you understand what I mean? So, yeah. And yeah, and maybe it's something what I'm just lately thinking about a lot, because it's sometimes not so easy to get some children, no, to really get out of them. No, and there are not so many opportunities. Sometimes there's a lack of opportunities, for example, in sports or in therapy places, no? And so yeah, I think it would be as well always nice to have in mind that the children as well are self-determined and self-directed in the activity.
Yeah, I think that you make a fine point, Simone. I think, you know, as an occupational therapist, you understand what it means to be truly family-centered and client-centered, yeah? And a big part of being client-centered is empowering the child or the individual, and knowing that they have a choice in this, and they do have a say. And I think with something, especially as vulnerable as surfing, we have to be mindful of that, and understand if the child is having a difficulty or any type of resistance with going into the water or being on the ocean. Like what are the underlying things that are leading to that? For example, I work with a number of kids that have a tactile defensiveness on their feet when it comes to sand, right? So for that child, like even being able to walk on the sand might elevate their system to the point of dysregulation or overstimulation, to the point where, like, no matter what I say or do at that point in time, like it's going to be difficult for them to have like a therapeutic opportunity to learn within that experience if they're super dysregulated, right? But you can solve scenarios like that by being able to maybe provide choices in which they still feel empowered to be a part of the process without necessarily having to dive into something that they might not be ready for yet, right? Like if I was working with a kiddo that had like really like poor vestibular function, or if they had some type of vestibular defensiveness, I probably wouldn't take them on a surfboard immediately, because for them, they're still trying to understand where their head is in relation to space, right? So for that kiddo in particular, I might do something a little bit different in terms of providing them two choices where they could still feel successful, such as, okay, well, maybe hopping on a surfboard today isn't going to happen, but how about this? Like, we need some help with creating this awesome sandcastle over here. If you want to help out, or if you'd like, we're going to go play a game over here where we're going to maybe play like beach volleyball or something, right? It's just something where they still feel like they have an opportunity to be a part of community. And then within that, like if I have an opportunity to work with them one-on-one, and if I'm seeing them in a capacity where I'm seeing them week to week, I can always work on the vestibular processing piece within the activity that they chose, right? So if the child ends up choosing like a volleyball activity, I would just be like, okay, like maybe we could play together, but you know what? We'll practice this while you are balancing like on a balance beam. Finding more ways in which they could feel more confident in terms of working on that underlying skill that will manifest into hopefully getting them out on the water one day, if that's what they want. Like if that's the overall goal of what they want, we can help them get to that place, but we have to be mindful of the underlying things that will manifest into function.
I do have one more. I put it in the chat. I do have one more maybe good thought-provoking question. So when I was a student, my instructor gave me an assignment and she said, here's one piece of equipment and I want you to think of 10 different things you can do with it. And then the rest of the day I had to do a different activity with each of the kids that I treated with that one piece. But I think that's super appropriate for everyone's programs, because I know for the most part, we're pretty limited on maybe funds or just equipment or the capacity of what you can do at the beach. So I just gave a couple ideas, but it might be helpful to think of just everything we've been talking about so far in the last almost hour of, preparatory activities or alternative options to surfing. And I gave kind of 4 things I think most people should have or have access to. So a surfboard, those large exercise balls, I don't know if there's a different name for them, a leash, or like a bucket that you use to make a sandcastle. So I know we're kind of starting to run out of time, but if anybody wants to go ahead and just give any activities they can think of, I'll add them to the minutes.
Yeah, that's a great assignment. And I think organically along the way during the pandemic, that's something that I had to do numerously, just because you would see like what you have to work with within the home place. And it was a great way for me to evolve my clinical reasoning outside of the clinic. So Meg was mentioning like those big exercise balls. I think that those are incredible and there's so much that you could do with it. I like an activity that I love to do especially for a child that having difficulties with like their vestibular processing, or if they're having difficulties where their head is in relation to space, I'll just put them prone on the medicine ball and rock them back and forth, because that linear vestibular input will help calm their body. In addition to that, while I'm doing that, I'm looking to see how their cervical and their trunk extension is against gravity, because that's something that you have to have in surfing as well, right? So that's like one given activity that you could do on the beach with a like a large therapy ball. In addition to that, some other things that I would bring to the beach, resistance bands. Like there's so many things that you could do with like different type of proprioceptive work. Surfing in of itself is largely a bilateral integration activity where you're incorporating both sides of your body in this reciprocal way. So there's a number of activities where you could work on that with a resistance band, where you're engaging those core muscles, but also incorporating both sides of the body. In addition to that, some other things that I would bring to the beach. I think like having like a longboard is always great for maybe a kiddo that might be afraid to dive into the water, but is okay with like being on a board. Just understanding like the vestibular component of what it is to be on this dynamic surface is always really helpful, and something where you could create it into a vestibular activity. In addition to that, other things that you could bring to the beach, trying to think.
Well, Jonathan, maybe we can hear Maria and Rachel, both OTs. Maria, you're down there in Argentina, of course, Rachel. What do you guys do? It's different in your neck of the woods. What are some things that you guys bring down? Maria loves it when I make her talk.
Yes. Hi, how are you?
Hi, Maria.
Okay. Thank you. I'm from Argentina, and we use like some of the same exercises with maybe like doing like jumping the waves, or doing like pulling like with the ball going forward and back, and we do with a rip, like to pull with the teams,
Yeah.
It's okay. I don't know if I'm saying like
tug of war.
Tug of war.
Yeah.
Ah.
Yeah. And what else? Because you mentioned a lot of activities. Now I have to think about it, but there are lots of things to do, like on the sand. Like we do another with the stability and with I don't know how to say, like a ball, but not like a half ball. A
boost ball.
Yes, with that one. So we do some exercises like to get more like stability and what else? Well, that are ones like examples, like.
Those are awesome. Rachel, what about you?
So I'll be totally honest. I am very new with the organization, starting out. So I haven't actually gotten to be there in the sessions yet. So I'm very like new to it. So I'm really absorbing everything you're saying, and I am taking notes, but everything you guys are saying are so practical. And that's what I feel like I was really wanting to hear, like those practical ideas that I can bring to the beach. So when I do get there for the lessons, I'll just be able to like have something, on deck ready to go for the kids.
Yeah, Gnome Surf is doing some amazing things, but I mean, frankly, they are missing out on some of the clinical side, Rachel. So I was really stoked to hear Chris tell us that he brought you on and you're going to help that out. Simone, I love the parachute. Oh my gosh. I mean, if you guys didn't do parachute when you were in elementary school, that's such a great idea. I mean, that's just fun for adults too.
Yeah. Yep.
Oh my God. Go ahead, Meek.
Something else that, so I worked in early intervention for about a year. So for anyone that doesn't know, I'm sure you guys probably have a good idea, but it's just kids under the age of 3 and you go into their home. So the nature of that is using whatever the families have. But something that's been really helpful of turning something that isn't really a toy. So into a toy. So looking at things from like a kid's perspective, like whenever I went to a kid's home, they could have a table and all of a sudden the table is now a tunnel. You know, you throw a beach towel on top, now it's a tunnel. So I don't know, Rachel, if that's helpful, but I always try to look at things from literally like getting on my hands and knees at a kid's height. So again, it's stuff that you already have that you don't have to buy, and just figuring out like how to turn that into something that's new. Because another great thing for kids is, you know, they, just like most adults, they thrive on sometimes like new experiences. So eventually they get tired of the same old thing. So you have to kind of get super creative and think like, okay, you know, this seashell might look non-functional to me, but now, you know, take 2 seashells or 2 pieces of driftwood and now those are drumsticks on the upside down pail. Or again, like I said, with the table, you can turn that into a tunnel, or I don't know, pretty much anything that you don't want to be a toy becomes a toy, just like anything, you know. Of course, like the thing that you buy for them they don't want, but then the thing that's, you know, been sitting in your house for 10 years is the thing they want to play with. But that's, I think, the best part about it, is sometimes you don't need to have a plan. You just bring a couple things down and you kind of have to see and watch what the kid's eyes go to, and whatever the kid gravitates towards, then it's kind of your job to turn that into the toy or the center of the obstacle course or whatever you're planning to do.
Yeah, I that's like part of the floor time model, right? Like following the child's lead and understanding, like, you know, if a child maybe starts digging on the beach, I might start digging right next to them just to show them that I understand their world. But with that said, there's like, you know, a ton of therapeutic benefits to just doing that in of itself, right? Like it's a great way to integrate both sides of your body. It's the sensory experience. But the biggest thing is you're connecting with the child in that moment. I really love the tug of war idea. One of my favorite activities to do is to help the child be like on a dynamic surface, like a BOSU. And then if you have like a backpack, you could always tie a rope to the backpack and have them just like pull the backpack to them while on the dynamic surface, right? Because in that, they're integrating both sides of their body while also trying to figure out a way to right their body in the center over this really dynamic surface, as they would with surfing when they're trying to paddle with both sides of their body and they have to pop up, right? So in doing so, you're educating and empowering the child's body and their readiness to do something like surfing. But I think that is an example of like another activity that you could do on the beach. And you could always do that in different positions too. So like you could always do that rope pull like in prone, right? If you want to work on more like extension, you could do it from that perspective as well. Or if you have a child that is not ready to be on a dynamic surface and standing, you could always have them go lower to the floor. So that way their center of gravity is lower, especially if they have difficulties with like the riding reactions, and just have them be maybe on knees, like on the sand, and then have them pull. Because we're always looking to see how we can grade an activity appropriately. So that way the child feels successful.
All of that. You know what's really interesting to me, and I do know that we're running out of time here, but this is so interesting to me because not having, like, I'm not a licensed clinician, right? And some of it is natural. It's innate. You see a kid digging, you go dig with them. That seems natural, but it's really interesting to me, Simone and Jonathan and Maria and Meeg and Rachel, as occupational therapists. Sorry, I'm going to put you on blast. We're going to go like 2 more minutes long because I'm really interested in this. Meeg, for all of you OTs, how does your clinical headspace come into play, like naturally, like where you don't even realize you're doing that? See, as not an OT, I don't know that I might be doing actual physical clinical type of moves by mimicking them or playing with them on the board. But I'm really curious is when you're out there, and I guess Rachel, you haven't done it yet, but for all the rest of you, I mean, when you're there, is it innate or is it purposeful? Like, are you like, oh, I'm going to do this because of this? Or are you like, oh, this is what the kid's doing and I'm going to meet them where they're at, and it just instinctually kicks in? I'm really curious about that.
Great question. I think it starts off, and it depends on, I guess, the program or the day. But usually my approach, and even when I'm in the clinic, is see what the kid starts doing first, kind of just to get a gauge on where they're at. And then it's pretty natural the more you do it, just like anything, you know, in the beginning, it's a little awkward. It's hard to kind of know how to progress the session. But I mean, the biggest thing, at least for me, is knowing how to find, like Jonathan mentioned, the Just Right challenge. So do I need to upgrade this activity, make it just a tiny bit harder? Or do I need to downgrade it, make it a tiny bit easier so that they're successful, so that they want to keep doing it? So that's kind of the biggest thing that anybody can do, is just like with anything, you know, like with all of us, you're surfing and you're like, you know what, this is getting too easy. You know, do I need to make it harder by getting a shorter board? It's the same concept of, you know, this kid's going to either start getting bored or he's not going to progress his goals. So knowing what the next step is. So if it's digging a hole, well, now I want him to do something a little different. So instead of just digging, I want him to dig and fill the bucket, or I want him to, I don't know. That's just an idea, but
yeah, like add on as they progress.
Yeah.
I love that. I love that. Maria, I see, yes, we would like the OT exercises to be shared, and maybe Meeg, you and I can help develop that. We'll obviously share it in the Google Drive, but Simone, what do you got? What's something like, how do you feel when you're out there? I love that answer, Meeg, because it's so natural. It's like, that makes sense. Simone.
I think what you say is something what really is like showing that the models which Jonathan was just talking about, they are based on normal development. And so this is nothing invented. This is something what the usual human development needs, just that in therapeutical sessions, you really use them a bit more purposefully, and you really know when to use what kind of. And I think once you have done, or well, this kind of formation, I think you have these glasses on and you can't take them off. I mean, when I gone on to the beach, I can't take off my OT glasses. I have them on. So even there are many natural things within these models, but I do have my model glasses on when I go to the beach, and every moment. So
makes sense.
But this all includes, it is all very logical. And I think because of that, many of us, we enjoy our job so much, because it is so, it's a natural way where it comes from.
Right.
I would say
you can take the girl out of the ocean, but you can't take the ocean. Like literally, you can't take a surfer out like ever. Oh, I love that so much. Okay, you guys are gonna kill me, but I accidentally deleted the photo, so I have to do one more. And then I feel like, God, that was so great, Jonathan. You're a rock star. Thank you, and all our OTs. And Suzanne, I think Surf Project in the Netherlands is really one of the programs that like reaches another level. And Rachel, between Teresa and Suzanne and Simone and Maria down in Argentina, unfortunately, COVID restrictions, she hasn't been up and running for a bit, but really paying attention to some of their forward thinking and forward moving programs. And some of that is just follow them on social media. I think Meeg has already done that, like shared social media, but don't hate me. I need to take one more photo and I'm not going to be in it. And then Meeg and Jonathan, you guys could say goodbye, but that was amazing. Thank you so much. So really quick photo, and then I promise I'm out. Sorry about that, everybody. I feel bad. Okay, wait, sorry. Hold on. I gotta get my camera ready. And 1, 2, 3. Thank you. All right, everybody.
All right. Well, thanks everyone for sticking with us. I know we went a little bit over, but I don't feel like anybody minded too much. Thank you, Jonathan, so much for giving.
Thank you.
Thanks, Jonathan.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much. I'm gonna put my email inside the chat. Please feel free to reach out to me for anything. But such a pleasure being here today, and thank you both to me and Chris for having me.
Yeah, and like we were saying, I'm writing down a lot of these activities, and if you guys, I mean, I'm hoping you guys think of more, please send them to me, because maybe I'll work with Chris to come up with like a master list of activities that we can just kind of always add to, that anybody can look at, because I feel like that might be helpful. So please,
we'll make a list, and then we'll put it on the website. So obviously this particular group, you guys all have access to the Google Share Drive for your particular group. But we definitely, this is all about, the reason we put these ISTO working groups together is in order to share on the wider sector. The idea is that when you hear something that really is fascinating and works, we want to lift it up. And the way to lift it up is to share it broadly. So, you know, a lot of people who weren't here today and just, they don't even know that there are so many really cool things with Mother Nature that they could be doing that technically fall under OT. It's just rad. So yes, Meeg, we'll work on it so that we can actually have a link on the website and it'll lay everything out. We've got all these OTs on here to help us out with the resources.